Okay. So this week we are going to talk about topography, so landform in Revit, and that will lead into our next topic, which will be the basement level. So how are we going to create basement level foundation walls and footing walls and get our lower level going, right? Really no questions up to this point? You guys are doing okay? Making it through?
I haven't decided yet. That's why.
What's that?
I haven't decided the project yet, but
Okay.
I will have another question.
Okay. Okay. You know what always brings out the questions? A good little quick drawing exercise. Maybe I have to assign a quick little intermittent drawing assignment. Maybe we'll, one of these days, do that. Anyway, okay. Well, let's talk about landform. Like I said, we're going to talk about landform and creating topography in our drawings. And then next, when we meet on Wednesday, we'll talk about basement walls, foundation walls, footings, and getting our basement level going. Okay. I'm going to open up I'm going to click File, New, or actually I'm going to open up a second session of Revit just so I can flip back and forth between two different sessions. And I want to show you what topography means, right? I think generally everyone knows what it means, but I just want to show you and make sure everybody's clear on the definition of that. So I'm going to open up the Revit sample project and we'll take a peek at this, okay? I'm going to go into a 3D mode here. And essentially, topography is the land that any project sits on top of, right? It's the landform that your architectural project sits upon, right? Some other terms you're going to hear are it's the property, it's the land, it's, you know, maybe those kind of terms, the topography, different things like that. But in Revit, right, we can generate those landforms and put them into our drawings, which makes our drawings even better because it adds kind of that next level of detail to the projects that we didn't have before. Topography is important for a lot of reasons, probably, you know, a couple quick reasons why it's important. Number one, it interacts with the design of the project, right? So if you're going into architecture and you're going to be designing buildings, spaces, right? Those spaces are going to interact with the topography, right? Or the landform. And you can do some really great designs using the landform to your advantage, right? So it helps in design, and then also when you're constructing the project, right, if you're like in construction trades, you're going to be excavating the site and you're going to be building on top of the landform. So it's helpful to be able to accurately represent the landform in here for building and for design of your projects, okay? Let's take a look at what this landform somewhat looks like, okay? So this is just the sample project. If you click on it, it's all one whole piece, right? If any of you are familiar with site plans or topography, right, you'll know that you'll know that we have a sort of a irregular boundary that kind of shows the landform. This right here is a property line, okay, indicating to the extent of our, not necessarily buildable area, but to the extent of where the property owner owns their property. These lines that we see here, these are topographic lines. We're not going to get this fancy and complicated just yet with our topography. I'm just going to show you today how to generate it, and then a little bit later on I'm going to show you how to annotate it, okay? So we have our topography. You have your major contours and your minor contours that represent slope essentially, right? So this is in metrics. So we, you know, Leela could probably recognize this a little better than us, right? She's, but it goes from 4,000 to 3,000 to 2,000. So you have these increments that show that we start at the top at 4,000, right? And we move all the way down to 0. And that indicates a slope, right? So if I draw a section through this topography, let's just take a look at it in sectional form, right? We can see from a shaded view, that's what it looks like, right? Really helpful, very important to have your topography in there if at all possible, okay? When I create a sectional cut like this, you're going to notice that it actually cuts the landform, right? So I get a ground line, which is a really thick line. And I also get this poché that looks like these 3 lines with 3 lines next to it, which indicates earth. Okay, so I get a good representation of my landform. I also get kind of a view behind as to what my landform is doing, right?
Does it always go in meters?
No, no, this is the sample project, so it's the units in the sample project are metric. So ours are going to be imperial, right? Yeah. All right, so we're going to keep it simple today, and in fact, let me, you know, guys, I have to go grab another file real quick. I'm sorry, but it dawned on me. I didn't think I had one of these, but I actually think I do. So let me grab this other file real quick. Hold on. Let's see. There's a couple of different ways that we can generate topography. Let's see here. Survey, there we go. Has anybody ever used topography in SketchUp? You can use topography in SketchUp too. Sorry guys, I'm looking for a 3D survey that I know I have on a project I worked on. It's here somewhere. Okay, there it is. This is it. Okay. I'm going to open this up and then we'll talk about it. So we'll just let it open up and look at it in a second. How many of you are civil engineering majors? None? I thought we had a few in here. Okay, well that's good. No, this is something, so there's a couple different ways that we can generate topography in Revit, and one of them is from a 3D survey that a civil engineer would go out and would provide for you, right? So civil engineer in combination with the surveyor would go out and survey the property, and then you know, that they and the civil engineer working together would generate these 3D topographic lines in AutoCAD that are not, that one's not flat, that have a slope to them, right? So in civil engineering, I would say that other than they have some proprietary software, I think it's called Civil 3D, if I'm not wrong, but they do work, I think, generally exclusively in AutoCAD, more so than Revit. But when you have your property surveyed, you can request, you know, of course, probably for more money, a 3D topographic surface. And so this is what you usually will get from your civil engineer with regards to your property survey, right? So this is an actual project I'm working on, right? It's a house and they've got a pretty good slope on their house. It's going to sit right in here. And so when I worked on this project, you know, it was really helpful to be able to have this and to be able to generate that topo surface, right? All right, so we'll just leave this here for now, and we'll talk about topos in Revit and generating them exclusively with Revit, and then we'll bring the idea of how do we use a topo surface that an engineer has given us to generate a surface. So I'm going to save this. Revit project. There we go. Okay. All right, so we know what topos are, topographic surfaces. We know what it looks like, right, in sort of a planish view or a 3D view. We know that we can cut a section through it and see it, right? We know that topography is landform. Okay, let's talk about how we generate an actual topographic surface, all right? I'm going to come back over to my first original drawing, and we're going to go here. And let's talk about creating some topography, okay? So I have my little house here, right? And I'm gonna generate my, and here's the thing, there's a lot more kind of complicated as far as where the topography sits in relation to your model and how far above sea level it is and all these different things that happen with topographic surfaces. Right now, I'm just going to keep it very simple and show you how to generate them, right? And if we have time in the end, hello.
I'm not late.
I was just, I think everybody's late today, honestly. It was that way this morning too. So I'm going to show you how to very simply create topos. And then if we have time at the end, I'll show you how to make them more complex and talk about how to manage them. But I think the important thing here in kind of the beginning Revit setting is just to be able to create it, right? So I'll leave it at that. So here's our little house, right? I have my main level floor plan. I've got all my other main floor plans that aren't functioning right now, of course. I also have my site plan, right, in my project browser. And that's a generic, by default level that is created in Revit when you start a brand new file. I'm going to double click on it and I open it up and all I see is my house. I see the roof plan of my house, right? And that makes sense because on a site plan, an architectural site plan, in fact, I have a pretty good example of one on my desktop here, which let me just show you what that looks like. This is from somebody else that we were referencing in a different class. But this is what a very simple architectural site plan looks like, right? You've got the roof plan of the house, you are seeing decks, you're seeing concrete, right? And then you're also seeing planted, you know, landscaping, okay? So this is what you want to see on your site plan. Okay, so it makes sense that we see our roof plan. Great. I'm going to look at my scale down here, okay? By default, it's 1 inch is equal to 20 feet. Engineering scales are going to be kind of that format, you know, something like 1 inch is equal to 20 feet, 1 inch is equal to 40 feet, 1 inch is equal to 10 feet, 1 inch is equal to 160 feet, right? As opposed to more of an architectural scale, like 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot, right? And the reason is because these are going to be a lot larger than most of your architectural scales, right? So you're going to have bigger numbers here. All right, so I think 1 to 20 is kind of large, so we're going to take it down to 1 to 10. 1 inch is equal to 10 feet. Okay, not a whole lot happens. All right, and let's talk about creating some topography. You're going to notice I still see my elevations here, so I'll be able to see my topography and my elevation view, which we've kind of talked about. We have a couple of little things right here on our site plan that we don't have on any of our other plans, okay? And I'm just going to move this real quick, okay? And we have what's called, oh, shoot. Did you see that? My little house moved. We have here what's called the survey point, and we have also the project base point, all right? We're not going to get too much into these today, but these two little objects, this object right here is connected to my house, and if I move it, right, my little house moves. You see that? So I'm not really concerned with that right now because it just doesn't matter right now, but kind of in the quote real world, if that happened to you, it might cause a little panic. But we're just kind of looking at it now, okay? This tells me sort of where this little house is built in my kind of, I guess if you want to call it model space area here, right? North, south, east, and west. And it tells me it's at a 0 elevation, right? And it tells me it's angled towards true north, right? So this indicates where the house is. This will indicate where a survey point is, like on your survey, right? So if I bring in a topographic surface that's actually from a survey, right, I will attach this survey point to my survey, and then it will locate my house using this project base point, right? So, you know, if I have a survey point out here, and then I move my project base point to, you know, here or whatever, right? This indicates this relationship from here on a surveyed point to that project, that location on that project, right? So I can unclip it. Don't worry about doing this. Just know that that's what it does. I can unclip it. I can clip it back. So if I move this, move my little house, and these two things reference one another, right? It says, from this surveyed point on an actual survey that I, you know, had done, the house is located here from that survey point, okay? For now, because we're not going to deal with them a whole lot, I would say that you could probably just turn them off. So I'm going to select them, right click, and I'm going to hide in view, elements. I'm going to select this little guy. Hello, right click, hide in view, elements. But you will see those on your site plan. I wouldn't worry too much about them just yet, right? Again, if we have time at the end, we'll get into some more of the explanation behind that. All right, so how do we generate a basic topographic surface in Revit? All right, I'm going to come up here to Massing and Site. There's a specialized tab for that specific task, okay? And I'm going to be using today Topo Surface, and I'm probably going to be using Property Line. We'll talk about property lines today, okay? When I create a topographic surface, I am going to have a few things I have to do. I have to indicate a level at which it lives. I have to draw a boundary on it, and then I have to specify heights for it, okay? So if I click on topographic surface, I'm getting tired of saying that. It's an awfully long word. I'm essentially brought into sketch mode, all right? Now, if I'm just kind of I'm very freely drawing a site plan, I'm been brought into sketch mode and I can sketch a surface, okay? But I'm not going to sketch it kind of the same way that we're used to sketching things. I'm going to sketch it using kind of survey points that I generate, all right? And those survey points that I generate will form a boundary around the house that I'm creating a surface for. And those survey points will have to be given an elevation, right? And that elevation right now is according to, because I'm on the site plan, it's according to the site plan, all right? Okay, so I click on Place Point, and this is going to be my drawing tool. So don't do anything. Let me just show you what this does. You see how it starts to generate a boundary, right? So my task with my place points is to draw a boundary around my house, okay? I could also go into wireframe view, WF, and I could click, and you see I'm kind of snapping and clicking to all these points around the house, right? So essentially I've kind of somewhat defined, well, the surface goes all the way through the house, but I've also somewhat defined elevations at the corner of the house, right? So at a most basic level with a surface, you have to define a boundary, whether it's 15 or 20 points or whatever, right? I can continue to add these. Okay. And then you want to create a boundary probably around the foundation of the house, right? Because you want to kind of in the real world, right, define what that ends up being. Okay. So that's how I'm going to create my surface. Now, if I just go in there and I start clicking away and I start generating a surface, which is what I just did, and then I hit finish, here's my finished surface, click, right, and I go into 3D, I have this potato looking surface, right? And it's flat. Okay. It's purely flat. Like if I look at an elevation, east, all I see is a line, right? There's no variation to this surface. I also start to see, though, when I go into elevation, I start to see the topography, the poché below that surface, right? So that's kind of nice. All right. So that was how I very simply created my surface. Now, if I click on it, right, I have a few properties here. I have material. I have, you know, some surface type properties, like how much surface area there is, right? How much square footage do I have on my property? And then I have some phasing that I can change here. So if I wanted this to be an existing surface, which I likely do, I'll change it to existing. Okay. All right. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to delete it. All right. And we are going to create another surface. Now the reason, let me undo that real quick. The reason that this surface, the house is very nicely perched, right, on top of that, correct? And essentially, if we were to look at this, you know, that surface was created at the site level, right? We were on the site plan when we generated it. And that site level is going to be at the same height as the main level, although my view range is set so I can see the roof plan, right? That's what was happening in that view, okay? The reason it looks like the house is just perched there is because we don't have a basement yet, right? Next time we meet, we'll talk about a basement. And then this will engage the basement, okay? And we can move it up and down and do some other things to this as well. But let's just get through today how we generate these. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to go back to my site plan. Let's generate another one of these, all right? So I'm going to go back to massing and site, topo surface, click. I enter a sketch mode, but it's not, you know, an exact sketch mode that I'm used to, right? I can choose place a point, which is when I click and I place these points, that's what I'm doing, right? As I click around, I'm placing points, but I'm also creating a region around this project, okay? So we also saw that as we clicked around, it was flat, right? We didn't have any variation, right, in the height. So what I want to do now is I want to show you how to create some points, but add some variation, add some topography, right? Some curvature, or not curvature, but some slope to our property, okay? So right now we have our absolute elevation, so it's relating right now to our house, of course. You also have this, we're going to leave that alone for now. You know, I think that, let me just kind of side note, out of all the things that are most complicated in Revit, I would say that generating topography is actually fairly easy, right? But how the model and the topography interact is fairly complicated. You know, just a little warning, if you know, are working with this professionally, it's very easy to draw a little model in here, and it's very easy to draw a little flat topo surface in here, right? What becomes more complicated is in the actual management of those two things, because it's not generally what happens. You don't generally draw your topo surface right in your Revit model for complicated projects. You draw two separate files and you link them together, right? It's kind of a better way of going about it, which means then the coordinates from one file have to coordinate with the coordinates from another file, right? So we're, again, kind of complicated. We won't wholly get into that, but I wanted to say that so that if you start ever working with these and somebody's doing that, you'll know why, okay? But on the topic today of very simply creating these with some slope, we're going to do that. I'm going to change the elevation. Well, let me do this. Let me place a couple of markers. Click, click. I'm going to place one here, click, one there, click, and I'm starting to generate my surface, right? I'm moving in this direction. And these are essentially 0, so from this point to this point, there's no slope. But let's make a significant downward slope. Or let's do upward. We'll do an upward slope. So it's going to start at 0 here, and it's going to slope up, 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 all the way to this side. And maybe we want to make it slope up 10 feet, okay? So I'm going to start with, I'm going to increase the elevation of my next point to 2 foot. Enter. So now when I click, 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 you see I start getting some lines, some contour lines, right? Indicating I have slope. So it's 0, 0, 0, and it goes from 0 elevation to 2. Okay, if I keep clicking, like if I click out here, I click out there, right, I get more slope. Now I'm going to change. I'm going to go to 4 foot. Click, click. I can do even more. Click, click. And it goes from flat, 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 and I have these 2-inch or 2 foot increments, and then I go to 4 foot increments. Okay, now we're going to go to 6 foot. Well, let's go to 8 foot. We'll make it drastic, right? Right? So it's bumping up to 8 foot. Now we'll go to 10 foot. Okay, so I'm just coming up here, changing it to 10 foot. Click, 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 click. And all these nice little topos are generating themselves. It's very wonderful, right? Okay. All right, so I'm essentially finished with my surface right now. I hit finish. Okay, SD shade. I go into 3D. Look at that nice little surface we have there. Very lovely, right? And again, right now we're just guessing, right? So this is the type of surface that you generate when you're working on a little residential project and you have, you know, it's a flat site in the middle of the city and you have the boundary lines and you know generally it's pretty flat from front to back. Maybe it slopes 6 inches, right? You pop in a quick little surface like this just to indicate there's landform and there's a ground plane, and it works very easily for you, right? If I go to my sectional views here, look at that. Ooh, right? We'll talk about that too. Not today. We'll do that Wednesday when we talk about the basement. Maybe we'll do it today. I go to my second section, right? SD shade. Oops. And there's my landform engaging my building. It's filled up my whole basement and it's extended past. So I'm going to open this up a little. I'm going to extend my crop region here. There we go. There we go, right? But essentially, let's get out past here. It's generated exactly what I wanted it to generate, right? So it's gone from 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? All the way sloped 2 foot, 4 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot, all the way up to level 2, which was 10 foot. Okay, I'm going to close this out and look at, or I'm going to go to my site plan. Okay, and we'll close that out, and then I'm just going to open up my section view. Click, click, WT. Sorry, let me close these out. There we go. Okay. So there's my landform right there in section view. Here it is. All right, so I've generated a small landform. Fairly easy, right? When you're thinking about this and making it very simplistic, you just have to think about what's happening, right? So we start at 0 and we go down -6 inches, or we start at 0 and we go up, 10 feet. You just want to represent what's happening there, right? No more than that. If I want to edit it, I can select the landform and I can hit Edit Surface. And then all of my little points are brought back up, right? And I can see where I clicked, okay? If I wanted to add another point on this, I'm going to change to wireframe, WF, so that I can see all of my lines, right? If I wanted to add another point, I could just continue on like nothing had happened. Place point, right? I changed my elevation to 2 feet again, enter. And maybe I'm thinking, you know what? Around my house, I want this to be 2 feet. Okay, so I can come in here and click. Click, I'm wreaking havoc on everything, right? Okay, so that's starting to look a little bit more, well, maybe I actually want it to be at 0, right? Okay, but I just created all these points. Well, I can select this point after I'm done with it, and I can come up here and I can alter that. I can tape 0, enter. Click, 0, enter, and it flattens it out, right? Click, I can hold down Control and I can select more than one point, so I have 4 of them selected, and I could change this to 0, enter, and I've got all this nice landform around my building, but it's kind of flat in the front. Looks pretty good. I'm going to hit Finish. Okay, 3D, there's my landform. Ooh, it's a nice big bathtub, right? All the water will drain right down and rest right up against the house for us very nicely. Okay, so there's our landform. Again, the way that we're doing it right now, very simple, just to illustrate something. This is not something you're going to say, hey, this was surveyed, hey, this is totally accurate. It's just, my best representation of topography, okay? All right, so I'm gonna click on this and I'm gonna hit delete. Okay, let's do one more, right? So if you wanted to generate topography in your midterm project, right? You would come in, you would open up your project, and you would go to your site plan, click, click, and you would come up here to massing and site, click. You would go to topo surface, click, and I am ready to draw points on my topo surface. Okay, you would specify an elevation. Let's do 0, enter, okay, and you would start drawing, click, click, click. There's my first set. Let's slope it down. We'll do -1 foot, enter, click, click, click. We'll do a few more, -1 foot, and then we'll slope up. We'll go up to 3 foot, enter. And we're just going right through the house there. And then we'll do 15 foot. Maybe there's a huge slope. Add one right in there. Looks great. When I'm done, I hit finish, this little check, click. Okay, I go into 3D, and there is my surface. Okay. Again, the topo surface, there's not a ton that you can edit on it, right? I mean, it kind of is what it is. I click on it. I can change the phase, which is pretty smart at this point, right? I can hit edit surface and re-evaluate my elevations, right? But there's not a ton that I can do to it, okay? If I want to, you probably noticed in that sample project, so I had this little guy open, I see the topo surface, but I see this kind of brown edge around it, almost like it's a, it's a section, right? You're able to view that in the 3D view if you turn on your section box. So I come over here to section box, and if I click and engage that topo surface, I start to see the actual thickness of that surface happening. Okay. That makes sense to everybody so far? Not bad. You guys struggling today, it seems like. Yeah? Okay. I was just telling Jameson I'm feeling pretty good today. Maybe it's because I've had some good coffee. I actually slept last night. Everybody else is tired for once, right? All right. So here's my topo surface. For your midterm, I want to see a topo surface, and I'm going to leave it up to you how you want it to look, right? If you want a flat site, fine with me. If you want it to be sloped, fine with me, right? I'll just let you play around with it. Topos are actually pretty fun to generate and work with. They're just so easy, right? You think, and maybe it's my own thing, but when I was in school, this was tough, right? I mean, doing this in AutoCAD, I look at you, Corey, because like, this was really difficult to do in AutoCAD, right? Things have gotten better, but I mean, when I look at this and I click 10 points and I've got a topo surface that looks actually real, it blows my mind, right? So it's great, it looks good, right? It conveys an idea to a client who can then really understand what their site is doing to their project, right? When you say, if we move it forward, we won't have to excavate as much dirt and it will be less expensive, or we won't have to have such a big foundation wall, or maybe we want it back in the earth so that the foundation is sheltered and it keeps it cooler under there, or whatever, right? They can look at this and say, oh yeah, I get it. I get that it slopes this much, and I get that, patio that I wanted right here isn't going to work, or whatever, right? So it's a good design tool as well, right? Okay, so we've got our topo surface, and we've just, again, been doing it. Yep.
I have a question. So how can you make the floor even? Because inside of the house looks like...
Yes, we'll talk about that. We're getting to that. I'll do it today a little bit, and we'll talk more about it on Wednesday too. Yes. So Leela is saying, oh, wait a minute, I don't really like seeing earth passing through my house. That's not what really happens, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Another thing that you're probably questioning is, hey, I've got this topo surface. How do I create a driveway, right? How do I create sidewalks? How do I make it look a little bit more realistic, right? Because as I think about it, with the tools I know, I could use maybe a floor and make the floor concrete and draw a floor on here, right? But then it wouldn't really follow the topos up, right? Which I kind of want it to do. So let's talk about how we can create what we call subsurfaces, okay? Subregions. So we're going to pull up this little, oh, look at that, right? We'll be able to create driveways and sidewalks and different things like that. I'm going to go to my main level here, or sorry, site plan. Okay. And I'm going to click on subregion. Oh, let me save my project. And it bumps me into a sketch mode. And at this point, I'm just going to really, oops, sorry, you know what, I think I should have, no, that's right, subregion, yeah. Okay, I'm going to start drawing what I would like to see on my, this doesn't feel right, let me make, I hope it works. I feel like I should have selected my region first. Oh, you know what I need to do? Okay, sorry, that's what I need to do first. I skipped a step. I need to split my surface first. So I'm going to split my surface first, okay, click. And I'm going to do that by clicking on split. I'm going to draw what I want to happen. So maybe that's like a sidewalk, right? I'm going to hit finish. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subregion, okay? And the subregion, I can define my material here, okay? So I can click on material. Let's do something like concrete. It still feels a little bit out of order for me. And I have, no, it worked, okay. I've got my subregion there, okay? So it essentially becomes two different pieces. Now these subregions, they're a little bit tricky. You can assign a material to them, but they don't graphically represent that, the hatch like in a plan view, right? So the problem I have with this is that it looks great, and it splits it and it makes it a different subsurface, right? But I can't see that it's actually concrete, which, you know, other than doing some regrading, which we're not going to do today, it doesn't essentially get me where I want to be. Like, it gives me kind of a representation and it's very quick, right? But when I am working with these things, usually what I end up having to do is I end up having to create a filled region over the top of it to make it look exactly how I want it to look, which we're not there yet. That'll be in a few weeks, right? So you can create these subregions, you can edit them, you can apply material to them, but there's going to be some extra detailing that you have to add in order for that subregion to read like actual concrete, right? HL, hidden line, because right now it just looks like there's a line around it. You know, you could draw something that looks like a driveway and it will look more like it should, but let me just show you what I'm going to do. Annotate region, filled region. Sorry, don't worry about doing this. I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. What I'm going to end up doing is drawing probably, I'm just going to do it down here, right? Something over the top. Oh shoot, I don't even, the long, there we go, there we go. Right, I'm probably going to have to draw some type of something over the top of it to make it look the way that I actually want it to look. Okay. All right. So how do I now, you know, this is, again, we're just kind of doing this to represent something. Maybe you're working on a house or a small project where, you know, you go and you get the plat from the county and you can draw over the top of it and create a site plan like this, right? How do I actually create a topo surface from a CAD file that I've been given by an engineer, right? And then once I've done that, how do I indicate things on it like property lines, right? And then once I've done that, how do I make it look like I don't have part of my land, you know, infilling my basement, right? So we have 3 more things we're going to talk about today, right? How do I generate from a CAD file I'm given by an engineer? How do I, you know, filter this out? And we'll continue that discussion next time we meet. And how do we create boundary property lines, okay? All right, I'm going to delete my topo surface out of here one more time. I want to show you one thing. This is a side note. I'm going to click on my section region and right click and hit hide, which you can do, okay? I want to show you or remind you, I think we've talked about this before, but you may have forgotten, that this 3D view here, it is this 3D view in your project browser, right? A 3D view of your model is still a view of your model, just like any floor plan, elevation, section, that is also a view of your model, okay? So if I click on level 4, right, and look at this, it's no different than me clicking on 3D and viewing my model like this, all right? And what I sort of want to indicate with that is that if I wanted to put that view on a sheet, that 3D view, I could drag it over, let go, click, and place that on a sheet, okay? So if you wanted to create, and eventually you will, if you wanted to create a cover sheet for your project, right, and you wanted to have a view of the house on that cover sheet and have it sitting on a nice piece of landform, right? That's how you would be able to do it, okay? You would take that 3D view, drag it over, and plop it right there, okay? Now, one thing, just one minor caveat, is that if I double click on that 3D view, if I change it, right? Look what happens on that front page, right? It also changed. Okay, so what I need to do is instead of using this 3D view, I want to right click and I want to duplicate the view with detailing, and I can create as many of these as I want. And by default, when I click on this 3D view right here, click, it takes me to this 3D view. It always takes me to the one in parentheses right here. Click, click, I'm here. But by making a copy at a certain view, you see how that's maintained? That was my last one, right? So this first one is my dynamic. Hey, I can move around, I can look at things, I can create a section region and, you know, cut the model and look at it, right? But when I find a really great view, like maybe that view, I right click and I duplicate it, and it saves that standalone, right? So that when I come in here and I move around and I'm looking at things, right, I still have those other two standalone views that I captured, all right? And all of these views can then be placed on a sheet. So if I have a cover sheet here and I want to put my one view on the front so that, you know, the city reviewing it can look at it and say, oh yeah, that's what your project looks like, you can do that. Okay. All right, let's go back to my 3D view, and I'm just gonna hide this actually. Well, actually, I'm gonna delete it, never mind. We'll bring it back if we need to. And I'm gonna create a topo surface now from a very well-defined 3D CAD file that was given to me, all right? So there's hey, I'm working on my own little residential projects, and I just, you know, draw my topo surface from the plat. And then we have a more complicated project or a commercial project where I'm given a survey that is a 3D AutoCAD file, right? And a 3D AutoCAD file means that I can look in my AutoCAD file and I can see that I have slope here, right? This is a file that the civil engineer generated. When I zoom out and I do a zoom extents, do you see how this CAD file, you know, it didn't just, when I did a zoom extents, normally when you do zoom extents in AutoCAD, it brings you into that little area, right, that you're supposed to be looking at. This CAD file, I know that it's been generated correctly because it is a very far distance above what would be considered zero in model space, right? So this CAD file has not only been drawn in 3D so that we see the contours on our topo surface, it has also been drawn an accurate distance away from sea level, right? So here in Salt Lake, we're what, 3,500, 4,000 feet above sea level. And if I look at these topo lines and I look at their properties, it will tell me that this elevation is 4845, right? And there's 4844, okay? 4840. So this CAD file has been generated using 3D elements, 3D lines, right? And then they've been accurately positioned in AutoCAD to represent where they are in with regard to sea level. All right. Okay, so I have this CAD file. I'm gonna close it out because I'll probably get an error if it's open and I try and use it. I'm gonna get some, let me just warn you before I do this, I'm gonna get some interesting things happening, but I'll navigate it the best I can, just so that you can see what happens when I use an actual kind of official file from someone, right? It's so easy, number one, and it comes in accurate. I'm gonna go to massing and site. Whoops, go to my site plan. Okay, delete that out. And I would generate a topo surface just like I normally would. Are you hearing the 3D printer? I keep thinking somebody's phone is ringing because I hear that 3D printer.
Really annoying.
And by annoying you mean mesmerizing, right? Topo surface, click. All right, so AutoCAD says, hey, you can create one from placing points, which we know how to do, right? And when you're just kind of winging it, you can just generate a boundary however you want it to look, right? And then we also have create from import. All right, well, that shows me that I can import a drawing file, right? Oh, look at that graphic, is wonderful. I can import a DWG file and it creates a 3D topo surface. So I click on create from import and I'm going to select an import, or sorry, specify a points file. So if I already had a CAD file in here that I had linked or imported in, I could choose select an import instance, okay? Or I can choose or no, sorry, never mind. It's gonna be this one. This one's a separate file. I'm gonna click on this one, but you can also select, if I had one in my Revit, right, I could select that one and it would still be, you know, valid. Click on select import instance. Oh, I was wrong again, sorry. Ooh, hold on, select an import. I think I might have to import it first. Hold on. This might get a little hairball. Just follow along the best you can. You're not going to be doing this right away, so just follow the best you can. Okay, I'm going to insert a CAD, import a CAD file. And it's my survey delete, and I want this to be at main level's fine, origin, preserve, we'll do black and white. We'll preserve. All visible. Okay. That's right, there we go. The other file where it says link to a file, it's one of those other CSV files. This is a different type file. Okay, so let's see. I'm getting a few errors, but I think that's okay. I'm gonna go into 3D, and I don't wanna crop my 3D. That's good. I'm gonna go into an elevation view. I'm pretty sure my, I go to manage links. Let's look here. CAD formats. Oh, my link did not come in. Let me do that again. Insert CAD. Revit project. Survey. It's there. Origin to origin. Okay, visible auto detect. We'll just do all. No, we want visible. Are we gonna get another error? One or more hatch regions were found in the imported file with unconnected boundaries. These hatch regions were ignored. Okay. All right, okay, good. There it is. So I am, right now I'm in I think I was in an elevation, right? So it probably wasn't in the best view. I should have been in a floor plan view. But my little topo surface was brought in. In fact, I'm gonna undo that and go back to I'm gonna go back to my site plan. Sorry guys. I wanna get it in the right view. So it goes into my little house. Insert, import CAD. Desktop. Revit project, survey, origin, main level. Preserve, visible. Okay, hopefully this works. Cross your fingers. Okay. I'm going to do a little section cut here. Oh geez, it's not wanting to come in here. Alright, well I guess we're just going to have to go back to what we just did so I can show you, but I need to stop using this CAD file. I think I've messed everything up. Or this Revit file. Oh, maybe that was it. Section region. Well, we'll just do it the way we had it there. Shoot. Okay, so we have our topo surface here, right? I'm going to select it, and it is pinned. It's a CAD file, right? I'm hoping this works, you guys. Sorry if it's finicky. I keep saying I need to start a new CAD or Revit file, and I never do. The way that we are going to manage this to create a topo surface, I'm going to click on Massing and Site, Topo Surface, Create from Import, right? I'm going to select my import instance, which is this file. Oh, it's not going to let me. You know what, guys? Hold on. Let me start a brand new file and put this in it. I'm going to unlink for a second. Let me just start a brand new file. I wanted my little house in here. All right. Massing and Site. Topo surface. Okay. All right, and of course it worked perfectly in a brand new file. Okay, let me just make sure it generates and then we'll go from here. Okay. Yeah? In a second, just 1 second. Trying to get this to work here, and I know it's in there, but I have to search for it. Okay, here it is. Okay. Oh, I'm having trouble. We might have to come back to this CAD file. It's not working the way I wanted it to. But I can show you what it looks like. Hold on, let me grab my file and link here back again. Okay. It's making it difficult for me, but let me show you how it did come in. I'm upgrading my model here. All right, so this is the house that used the, oh, and it's not linked. Ugh. Nothing ever works right when I just grab stuff. I actually did it correctly and did my topo surface separate. It's not finding it. 1 second. Okay. Essentially, yeah. Yeah. here's all the finickiness of AutoCAD is not completely gone, right? We still have to link things. They just call it a different name. Okay, there it is, right? So that is what this file essentially looked like when it was generated. I think I just have the wrong CAD file, because you get when you get a civil file, it has a lot of stuff in it. You have to go through, embed it, and delete a bunch of stuff, and join all the lines together, make sure, you know. And so it took a second to, but this is essentially what that link turns into, right? And it was when I did it correctly and I had everything prepared correctly, right? It was instantaneous. And so I was able to bring the link in. I created a linked file, I generated my topo surface, and then I linked my house into the topo surface file. And then in the house file, I linked in that other topo surface, so they're both together shared. And then I had to share their coordinates, and it actually worked really, really, really well, funny enough. But it's really nice to be able to see that, you know, exactly how that topography is going to function, right? That it comes down and we have a little swell right here where water is going to collect, right? So, you know, having to grade around this house is going to be a little bit difficult, you know? Then we have this big plaza that is going to have to be filled in, right? We're going to have to deal with all of this topography around the edge of the house. But it is good to be able to see that, right? You guys aren't really I'm going to give you all a file and I'll let you generate topos from it, but you're really not going to have to worry about generating one of these right now. I know. And I really this week am going to get a new Revit file that actually I haven't changed so much it's not functioning. All right. What's that?
Just take credits.
His is already finished. You're being showed up there, huh? Yeah, that was a long time ago. All right. So we have our little house, and we know how to generate, you know, a basic topo surface. I'll do one more. How do we sort of filter out that that infill that gets in the lower level, right? In the basement or inside of the house. So let me create a quick one of these. Topo surface, create from a point, right? We'll do 0 over here, or we'll do 0. Right, click, click, click. And we'll do 5 foot back here, click, 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 click. And then we'll do 15 foot so we get a really nice good slope. Right, and we hit finish. And there's our topo surface. Okay, I'm going to SD shade it. There we go. If I pop into 3D, there's my topo surface. If I go into my sectional view over here, click, click, there's my section. And I have all of this earth running through my house, okay? The way that we're going to navigate that and filter that out is what's called a building pad, okay? So if I go back to my site plan, essentially what I need to do, I'm going to either do a wireframe, WF, so I can see the basement or the outline of the house, HL, hidden line, or I'm going to click on my roofs, and I'm going to temporarily hide them, okay, just so I can see the outer boundary of the house. And I'm going to create a building pad, right? Here's a building pad. I click on the building pad, and essentially what the building pad is you want to create a shape, whatever that may be, but you want to create a shape. In our case, it's going to be the outer edge of the house, right, to the outside of the foundation. And you want to place the building pad at the level where the earth is kind of infiltrating your house, right? So we are going to, I'm going to click on my boundary line. We're brought into a sketch mode, of course. Click, click. I'm going to outline where I want kind of the filtering of my earth to be. So that earth, I want it to stop at the outside of the foundation wall. I don't want it to stop at the inside, like go through the foundation wall and, you know, stop at the inside of the wall. I want it to start even before we get into the house. So I'm going to trace a boundary of where I want that earth to stop. I'm going to place it wherever the problem is happening. So if the earth is coming in at the basement level, I'll place my building pad at the basement level. In this case, it's at our main level because, you know, that's where we only have the main level. I'm going to hit finish. And I mean, now nothing really appears to have happened except that my lines, my topography lines now, right, they've stopped where the building starts. Right, look at that. So I've got my building pad. Do you see that extra right there? When I hover, it's a building pad. So right now it's in line with the top of my slab down. Let's say that's a basement. If I move it down, you see how it filters it out even more. So if I wanted it to start kind of down here right below my slab, I could click MV move, click. I could place it at the bottom of my slab if I wanted. Looks pretty good. The only thing, my really only kind of pet peeve with building pads is that they're an object and I can see them in my view, right? And that's good, I guess, because I can move them. I can alter them very easily. But if I do a hidden line like I'm about to print, HL, right? I get that extra line for that building pad, okay? But not to worry, they are an object. They can be turned off, right? I can click on it. I can right click and hide it. Or I want to remind you we have kind of the visual graphics, VG, visual graphics. And I can, this is a component of the topo categories. So I come down here to topography, and I have, oh, just kidding, it's under site. I don't know why they have site and topo separate, but they do. Okay, and I have building pads. So if I uncheck that and I hit OK, it's just hidden. It's still there. It's still performing its function, right? I see that the earth stops. I see my very thick boundary line going all the way around the edge of my cut, my section cut there, but I don't see the line of that building pad anymore. Okay, so we create our topos.
Sorry, how do you
Yep.
open the visibility again?
VG. Yep, visual graphics, VG. Similar to a layer dialog box, right? Okay, so that's how we're going to use building pads. Okay, so we can create our topo surfaces using the topo surface option. We can split the topo surface and draw things like sidewalks and driveways and different things like that. We can then assign a subregion to that. Okay, so we have things like sidewalks or whatever, you know, we define those as concrete. Okay. Then we also have the building pad, which we can filter, you know, the earth out of our building components using those, right? Pretty simple. The final thing we're going to talk about today is property lines. How do we draw property lines, actual property lines on our drawing here, okay? And today I'm going to keep it fairly simple and just show you how to create kind of nondescript property lines because it's fairly easy. There's two ways that you can go about creating property lines on something like this. You can use the actual property line tool, okay? And what's nice about that is it's defined as an object in Revit, meaning Revit recognizes the property line as an actual property line object, okay? So that's pretty nice. It gives a nice thick pen weight to it, and it's a dash dash, or it's a dot dot dash pen weight, which is appropriate for a property line, right? So that's one way of doing it, the very proper property line, okay? I can generate these property lines very freely using just dimensions. I can enter things like surveyor units if you've been given a survey and have an actual surveyor unit to input, okay? Another way that you can go about creating property lines is just using what we call detail lines in Revit, right? Detail lines are going to be a much less formal way of creating property lines, and they're not actually property lines. They're just representations. They're line representations, right, that look like a property line. And I'll start talking about detail lines through all the different drawings we're going to be doing. But essentially, detail lines are just dumb lines, meaning they don't have anything connected with them, like a structure or a designation or a definition, and we can draw them in to represent something, right? I would say that about 50% of the time I use actual property lines, and 50% of the time I just kind of, I guess you could call fake in detail lines for my property lines, okay? I click on property line, and I can create it by entering distances and bearings, which I don't have any right now, but that would be, hey, enter your surveyor units, enter your bearings, right? Which when you have a civil AutoCAD file, you can do. Or you can create by sketching it. So I could come up here and I could start sketching my property line. I could say it's, 100 feet. It's pretty, well, it goes off the property. That's not what we want, right? There we go. And maybe this goes 75 feet. And this comes down at an angle. And then we finish up right there. Okay, I hit finish. And I have my property boundary. Okay, and again, what's nice about this is I can click on it, and it's an actual defined property line. And right now that may not mean a lot, but when you start annotating, when we start annotating our drawings, Revit recognizes objects in the program, and it will be able to keynote them automatically. So if that's a defined property line and I keynote it, Revit knows that it's a property line, and it will assign that value to its keynote, okay? If I use dumb property lines using detail lines, then I don't get that functionality, okay? All right, ooh, it's taunting me up there in the corner, isn't it? I'll bring a working file that I know works, a 3D CAD file for next time, and we'll do that together. Okay, so for your midterm, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to draw a topo surface in your midterm, okay? And I don't really mind, I'm gonna let you be free with it. I don't really mind how you do it, right? I want it to, if this is your midterm, I think this is a good distance away, right? You want it to be somewhat larger than your midterm. Corey's looking back there like you're just going to do a vertical cliff or something. That's fine. Do it. You want to be somewhat realistic maybe, or reasonable in it. Make it somewhat larger than the property you're creating, right? The house, or the house. Put some slope to it. It could be very slight, right? Like if you want it just to slope gently and not deal with it, great. You could add some topography to it if you want to have a different look to your property, right? But play around with it, see how you like it, check out the functionality. But part of your midterm will be, you want to add a topo surface in there, okay? You're going to have to add a building pad, right? So once you have your topo surface in here, you will switch to like a wireframe, WF, view, or you will hide the roof, so that you can draw the outline of the building pad all the way around the object, okay? And you want that building pad to sit wherever it's appropriate in your project. We'll get basements in there this week, so you may have to move it, but wherever it's appropriate so that your topo surface is filtered out from your project, okay? Makes sense. All right, any questions so far? Topos are not too bad. I actually think they're kind of fun because they work usually, which is nice. They never used to. All right, so we're gonna stop there for today. Put those, get these into your midterms. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about adding a basement and how that's gonna interact with your topo surface. Foundation walls, footings, kind of a complicated topic, funny enough.
Midterms due next Monday, right?
No, it's due the 13th, 2 Mondays. So we'll talk about basements and foundation walls and footings on Wednesday, and then I think here we'll probably talk about some annotation, some dimensions and room tags, things like that. And then here I'm going to kind of draw in class so that you can kind of watch me do some of this stuff. And then the midterm will be due, and we'll get going on a small commercial project. So we'll talk about storefront windows, different systems like that, and we'll start working on those.
So we're not gonna have like a work day in class?
No. Nope. Well, I mean, if you want to do it on was it the 8th? We could do that. I could not draw in class, and if you guys want to work and ask questions, that's fine too. Maybe we can see where you're at that point. Okay, we can do that. That's fine. Okay, good. I'm gonna stop my recording here.